Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome back. And my name is Jeffrey Carr, and I am a disciple of almost 40 years of a spiritual teacher. He called himself a guru, a spiritual teacher named Gururaj Ananda Yogi. That's his picture right behind him. And he was active in the late 70s and the early 80s. He was part of a number of Indian-based teachers that were coming to the United States and to the West about that time. Unlike a lot of them, he did not himself call himself an Indian teacher. He didn't do a lot of the typical Indian stuff with the Patanjali aphorisms and the texts and the beads and the bopping with feathers like Muktananda did and all this kind of stuff. He said that he was a spiritual teacher for everybody, although he comes out of a deeply informed Indian tradition. And he said he wanted to bring spiritual teachings that were applicable for everyone's spiritual or religious background. He himself said he was not really religious. He was spiritual. He comes out of Indian philosophy, and I now know, although he didn't talk about it much, that he comes out of what one Western philosopher called the perennial tradition, or almost the universal tradition. The Indians themselves say it's one of the several Vedanta traditions. And as I've been telling you in these podcasts, I now know that it is a particular kind of Vedanta. Vedanta means the religion, the teachings of the Vedas, which are these ancient Indian scriptures. I now know that he was an Advaita Vedanta teacher. That means a non-dual, a all is one. You might know the term Brahman, which is the Indian term for this unity, this mysterious unity. And as you also know from the Indian philosophy, they insisted that our individual divine selves, which the Indian tradition sometimes called the Atman, although Gururaj rarely used that term, we might call it the spiritual self, is united with, and in fact is the same as, the universal or divine self, which is called the Brahman. Gururaj freely adapted terminologies from Western approaches to spirituality, which is predominantly what we would call dualistic, which means you have an I-thou relationship with the divine or with God. You petition or you pray to a God, which might be Yahweh, it might be, in the Jewish tradition, of course it's God in one of the Christian traditions, but it's dualistic. It assumes that man, or a human being, might have a fragment of God within you, or a reflection of God within you, but essentially God was something out there that you were petitioning, that you were praying towards. Gururaj comes to tradition saying that this is a stage in understanding, but the truth of it is it's the same. It's all the same. And Gururaj made a radical proposition, the very heart of Buddhism, Hinduism, and the other religions that come out of India. The very heart of that is that thou art that. Thou art divine. You are divinity. You are the divine yourself. You do not realize it. You are ignorant of that fact. You don't have to attain divine consciousness or enlightenment or self-realization, which are various terms for this. You don't have to attain it because you already are it. You simply have to awaken to that fact. This is Gururaj's constant theme, as it is the theme of all of the great spiritual traditions of India. And in fact, if you look hard enough, in the Christian and Judaic traditions as well. You realize the unity of this feeling we have that we're an individual self. Essentially, though, we and the divine are the same. Gururaj had his own delightful, subtle, warm-hearted, loving, compassionate, ironic, very intelligent approach to working with us to help us wake up to this reality. And he himself was an amazing character and an amazing teacher. And it was a great joy and privilege in this life to get to work with such a person. Trust me, gurus are now unfashionable. He was part of the guru tradition, the guru and the chela, or the disciple tradition. But trust me, I've met a guru. I've met several, in fact. I've met several from the Tibetan tradition, but Gururaj is my own guru. They're not like ordinary people. They're very different. I understand that people are skeptical because of so many false gurus, so many people out for money or power or sexual abuse or something they're after. They are still greedy for that stuff. A lot of false teachers in the West and in the East. But there is such a thing as real gurus, and he was one of them. So I like to, once a month, take one of his satsangs. A satsang means a gathering in the presence of truth. Okay, it's a term from Indian philosophy and Indian spiritual teachings. And of course, Christ also did satsang when he would have people around him and he would talk about the nature of God and the nature of what is divine and the nature of human beings' relationship to the divine. So Christ did too. It's satsang, a gathering in the presence of truth. Years ago, back in the 80s, when I was in my 20s and starting a family, we all were very young then. We used to go on these week-long retreats or several-day retreats. This organization, the American Meditation Society, still holds these gatherings several times a year. But back in the day, we used to gather and Gururaj would come and get several of these talks or satsangs every session. We were young and we weren't terribly naive, but we didn't know as much as we thought we knew. And a lot of it just went right over our heads. And there's a real temptation when we read the teachings of Gururaj or any great spiritual teacher, when we read the teachings of Christ, is to say, oh yeah, I've heard that one. I've read, oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, right. What's something new? There isn't anything new, friends. There's perennial philosophy. There's only one truth. The truth is one. We're very skeptical once somebody says, there's only a truth. We say everything. Oh no, it's only true some of the times or to some people. Everybody has their own personal approach. Yes, everybody has their personal approach, but the truth is the truth, and the truth is one. And this is one of the things that all of us who are spiritual seekers come to eventually. Religions differ, philosophies differ, and we as individuals are very different from one another, but the truth is one. And gradually we come to this awareness. So, as I said, I like to read one of his satsangs once a month, and I make sort of commentary on it based on my devotion, my love for the Guru, but also based on, like a lot of you, I've been doing this stuff now for about 40 years, and I've learned quite a bit about Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism. I've learned quite a bit about the non-dual Advaita Vedanta, specifically and especially the Ramakrishna versions of that. I've read Krishnamurti, I've read Muktananda, and I've done a lot of Zen in my time. I've also carefully read the Gospels. And most recently, I've gotten involved with Kashmiri Shaivism. I found that all of these are different systems, different ways of talking about this one truth. And Gururaj is talking about this one truth, and he does it in a particularly vivid, sometimes shocking, often humorous way. So this particular satsang I'm going to read is one I think that one of our members in AMS, Sujay, read in the last course when we all got together. It's called The Relationship Between God and Man. And when Gururaj gave these satsangs, what he did was he would solicit questions from the audience of chelas. He did not know the questions beforehand, and he was absolutely a genius at doing these extemporaneous, right off the top of his head, I think brilliant responses to these spiritual questions. So I don't have the whole question from the audience, but what I've written down, because these are lightly edited. I work directly from transcripts. I do very little real change. I just edit some of the idiosyncratic English that he used, and I cleaned up the grammar a little bit, but basically I've kept it completely intact. And I've cut out a lot of his outrageous jokes and clowning around, unfortunately. If you want to hear that, listen to YouTube and hear some of his actual satsangs, although they cut out a lot of his crazy jokes on the satsangs too, when you see them on YouTube. So somebody in the audience asked Gururaj, what has caused a person, us, humanity, men, women, what does it cause us to feel separate from God? And then there was another Chela. He often took several questions. The other Chela asked a very ancient question. Who are we? And where did we come from? And why are we here? So 2 questions. Why do we feel separate from divinity or God? Because we do. The second one, who are we? And where do we come from? And why are we here? Okay, those are the 2 questions. Now, I've noticed as I've been lightly editing these satsangs, he's so good that he basically answers the questions in the first few lines, the first paragraph in this case. In fact, he often answers the entire questions in the first sentence. And if you're really sharp, you can get it in 1 sentence. We rarely are. The first paragraph, a little bit more explanation. If we're really shrewd, we get it in 1 paragraph. Then he goes on and does the longer version for the vast majority of us. It's very good spiritual practice to read and to understand and to listen to teachings, not once, not twice, not 10 times, not 50 times, but for your whole life. Each time, if it's the truth, something gets peeled away and you understand it in a little bit more subtle, a little bit more complex way. So again, you think you've heard this? I often think I've heard this before. Well, it doesn't hurt us to hear it again. So the Chela asked, why does humanity, or why do we seem to be separated from God? And who are we? And where do we come from? And why are we here? So Gururaj, the cause of man seeming to be separated from God is based on a total misconception that has been fostered by so-called church organizations. That's a remarkable thing to say. He's saying your religion, your spiritual beliefs that you've been taught are actually separating you from experiencing God. That's something to take in. And what is that about? Because the church says that they're doing exactly the opposite. So he goes on. There never has been any separation between man and God. If God is regarded to be omnipresent, well, then how can there be any separation? It is that he is present within you all the time. What makes a person feel that he or she is separated from God is an undeveloped consciousness or awareness, so that you don't seem to realize your real self. You find yourself separated from the real self because of all the problems that you go through, all those anxieties that you have, and all those troubles you suffer. And then you will say, is there really a God? You question this. You ask, if there's a God, like all the theologians say, like all the religions say, that is a kind and compassionate father or mother, well, then why is it so unkind to everybody? Why do we all suffer so much? But people don't seem to realize that divinity is actually a neutral energy. It's an all-pervading, all-permeating, neutral energy. And that it's you, yourself, that bring this suffering upon yourself. This suffering comes about by various mental conflicts that you yourself have created. And divinity is not to be blamed. That's enough to make a lot of us really pissed right there. What do you mean I brought all this suffering onto myself? What about all the violence in the world and the poverty and the oppression and the prejudice and the hatred? I didn't cause all that. How can you possibly tell me that I created this sense of separation? And by the way, what is it? Well, how can you possibly say that God is good since all these terrible things exist in the world? I don't get it. I didn't cause all this suffering. It was caused to me. It's done to me. I'm the victim of all this suffering, right? That makes you feel separate. That makes you feel separate from God. So man, he's got a lot to explain. Let's go on. So how many times a day do you think that about divinity? You don't. You'd rather think of the dinner you're going to cook, or the clothes you're wearing to work, or the work you're going to do at your job. You don't even think of divinity at all. The only time you think of God is when you're in trouble. Then you say, oh God, please help me. Well, he won't. That's for sure. He'll tell you to help yourself. Therefore, there's an old saying that God only helps those who help themselves. So much for petitionary prayer. He's right, though. You think about it. You don't think about God much until you say, oh God, help me. What am I going to do? That's the only time you think about God. And then he says, God isn't going to help you. Then he says, God will just help you to help yourself. What? What good's God then? What this really means that you're activating divine energy, whatever that is, to help yourself bring calmness into your mind. And by bringing calmness into your mind, your anxieties disappear. People do have an analytical mind. People aren't stupid, but they don't analyze their thought processes in the proper way. They always analyze their thoughts in a negative way. And 99% of the world's people like to think of the dark side of things and not about the silver lining behind every cloud. They don't see the opportunity that lies in every adversity. Very interesting. I read about something that brought tears to my eyes. It'll be tears to my eyes just thinking about it. They had some guy who, that they put in prison. He was in prison for 40 years. I read about this in Faith and, the news feed today at breakfast. He was this bearded guy. He was like 20 or something, and he did, I don't know what he did. He held up a liquor store. He did something. He wasn't. He got blamed unfairly. He broke up a bar fight. Then later on, this guy in the bar died or something like that. And then there's a fire or something. Anyway, somebody told the cops that he was at the present of this burning, and he got blamed unfairly for it. And they threw him in prison, of course. And 40 years later, this person who had ratted on him recanted and said, I just completely made that stuff up. They were leaning on me. A couple of people in the neighborhood said, unless I fingered somebody and had them sent to jail, they were going to come and hurt me and my children. So I lied. He had nothing to do with it whatsoever. And they finally, they got him out of jail. Well, this guy, oh my God, what had he done in jail? He did nothing but spiritual practices. He said he woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning in his jail cell and he meditated. And he obviously either figured it out or had some help, because he said, listen, I could have gotten completely consumed by bitterness and rage. He said, the only person I would have hurt was myself. He said, sooner or later, something was going to happen. I'd get out. And he did. And he kept up with his family. And now he's just like this guru character. He goes around and his family love him. And he says all he could think about was how he could help others. Jeez, it just made me weep. And I thought, grace is amazing. Grace is amazing. If you can look this guy up, he was just today. He's got his beard. He looks like Dick Gregory. Do you remember Dick Gregory? He's a very dignified looking guy. And he's just like, he took a horrible, horrible injustice and he made a spiritual practice out of it. And this guy is a high level being. Also another kid, somebody else, forgive me going on, but a couple of days ago, it broke my heart. Some guy who's now 40. When he was 20, he was involved with somebody else, murdered somebody. And just because he was around, I guess they called him an accessory to the murder. So they put him away. And then, they not only put him away, but after a while, he was on death row. And our beloved president, of course, refused to commute the sentence, and they killed this guy. And you saw a picture of him in the newspaper. He's the most angelic looking guy. He's 40 years old. He was just a sweetheart. And they said when he was in the death chamber, he turned to the people and he said, it's all right. He said, I'm sorry for anything I would have done. He was a model prisoner. Instead of letting him out, they killed him. I thought, oh my God, this world. But again, grace is amazing. These are people that turned a horrible situation, and they talk about the silver lining in any adversity. And most of us whine, if like, gee whiz, the cat barfed on the rug. That's what I do. It's awful. It's like, not these people. Anyway, they do not see the opportunity that lies in every adversity, says Gururaj. God helps those who help themselves, says Gururaj. Divinity is a neutral energy. The adversity, so said Gururaj, the adversity that you're going through makes you feel that you are separate from God, where in reality there's no separation has ever occurred. Divinity is said to be infinite and eternal. Well, so are you, infinite and eternal. Dropping one body and picking up the next body is just like changing from one suit to the other. And yet that inner self forever remains in its own stillness. This is complicated. He's not talking about the way we think of the soul. It's very subtle. Dropping one body and picking up the next body is like changing from one suit to the other. And yet that inner self forever remains in its own stillness. It is said in theology, be still and know that I am God. But who is it to be still? You are to be still and to know that I am God within myself. God does not need to be still. He is that stillness. This cognition must come from you. This can be very easily achieved by a process of meditation. You lead the conscious mind through the subconscious layers and then to the superconscious mind, where you make contact with the divinity. Let's just say, I don't want to talk too much about it. We still think we're a separate soul and that God is going to like engulf us or something. This is really, the mind cannot, the ordinary mind cannot process this. You are divinity. That's what's making this all happen. Meaning the next thought and the next thought and the next thought and the next motion and the next motion. The thing that says, I am, then you give it a name. I am Jill, Jean, or Jack. The name part is extraneous. I am is the stillness. It's really difficult to get. That's what he says about as soon as you go to the superconscious level, you say, oh, I am. Jeff is something I temporarily made up. I pick up this body and I drop, I go from life to life. Not a big deal. More bodies show up. You know why? Because God's having a good time. But let's go back in here. Here's Gururaj again. I do not believe in God. I know God. And that's what everyone must strive for, to know God. By knowing God, you will find the living God, and not some abstract conception of some old man sitting on his throne somewhere up there. The separation is not really a separation. It's just based upon your own personal ignorance. Your divinity right now. Through the process of evolution from a primal atom, one goes through many different experiences. All of these experiences go into a memory bank, which is in your mind. Unpleasant experiences have a habit of clinging more to you than good experiences. You know, we have a negativity bias. We remember the terrible things that happened to us, like, oh, I ran out of coffee this morning, and we forget that the sun was shining all day. We had this, you know, it's all we remember is this one irritating thing. When these unpleasant experiences cling to you, your faith in divinity diminishes. It clouds up everything. Now that sun is shining up there all the time, but it just is covered by clouds. But who creates these clouds? It's the sun itself. It draws up water vapor and it condenses itself to become a cloud and then obscures the sun. But the sun itself is untouched. So we're living in obscurity and ignorance by denying the universality and the eternity of that which is. Through spiritual practices, you develop the sense of isness. I am that I am. Yahweh. You develop the sense of isness. And the more you develop the sense of this isness, the more you will live a life of the here and now, and not a life in the past or a life projected in the future. You know that incredible saying by John Lennon? He says, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. You guys know that one? John Lennon. It's more subtle than that. Your sense of separation is your thinking. Not the fact that you actually think, because you can't stop your brain from thinking. You think, oh, I got to go, what do I need from the supermarket? I need bananas, I need coffee. Oh yeah, I better get some gas while I'm on the way. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, you think you're thinking. God's thinking. Where do those stupid thoughts come from? How did you know that you ran out of bananas? How do you even know that there are bananas in the first place? All of that is God's doing. The awareness is God's doing. The awareness is the God. That's the stillness. The stuff that you identify with. Well, I'll go on with this Gururaj stuff. So how do you develop this sense of isness? Gururaj like to say, isness is God's business. How do you develop the sense of isness? Isness is a consciousness of the highest level. Isness is the consciousness of the highest level. Isness is divinity. I am that I am. That's what God said to Moses. Moses said, what is going on? What is this? I am that I am. You have a gross consciousness, which works with the sensorial input. It's just floundering around in the senses. That means, oh, I'm hungry. I need a banana. I better go get a banana. You know, it's like the constant thoughts being processed, like, oh, there's a bird. I like birds. No, I don't like that bird. You know, that's the constant mental stimulation, the thoughts stimulated by the sense impressions. Because you flounder around in these senses, you feel separate from God. Because the stimuli you receive are forever changing all the time. It's changing and changing and changing. So for one day, you might like to eat a particular dish and you like it very much. And the next time it's the same dish and it seems completely tasteless to you. It's the same dish of food. This is caused by your mental conditioning. But if your mind is continually been conditioned to separation, you can also recondition or repattern the mind towards non-separation, another very subtle point. When we're self-realized, it's impossible for us not to experience everything, not as Jeff, this man sitting here. You experience it as divinity itself. You experience isness as isness. And all the rest of it is just the flow of stuff that arises spontaneously from the mind of God. But we're relative beings. We're identified with our body and our form. God has chosen, like he said, the sun is there, but it's veiled in itself with its clouds. And this is a very mysterious thing. God decides to delude itself so we can be people. But you can recondition your mind, as I have, to always be aware that what you're experiencing is just the flow of experience, neither good nor bad. You may react to it like, oh, I don't want that Trump, or oh, I do love that Trump. But that's just your reactions to the flow of experiences. It has nothing to do with isness. Isness is just what is, the flow of experience. That's isness. And the awareness of the flow of experience, that's the isness. The greatest trouble in the world has been caused by duality, the separation that occurs between you and divinity. The duality is the greatest cause of all these problems, because when you have two things, then there's friction. But when there's only one, there's no friction. With what can the one have friction? Then there is one. There is no second factor or objects with which it can have friction. This is realization, in which the level of unity consciousness is reached from the lower levels of consciousness. This is taught by Jesus in the scriptures. To ignorant people, Jesus would say, pray to that Father in heaven. That's because that's all that ordinary people could understand. But to others who might be a little bit more advanced, he would say, you are part of God. But to those who really knew his teachings and could really understand Jesus, he said, I and my Father are one. Gururaj has talked about this particular principle in other teachings. He says there is dualistic thinking, which is fine. I and God, I and Jesus, I and Krishna. Approaching God through prayer and religious observances and little statues and pictures, that's fine. Because it repatterns the mind away from selfishness and suffering. It repatterns our limited awareness. So it's good. It's better than believing in what most people believe in, which is money and power and domination over others. That's what a lot of people believe in. That's absolute. That's guaranteed to bring suffering. Absolutely guaranteed. So it's good patterning. Then he says there's semi-monistic thinking. I am a fragment of divine. The God is within me. That's a deeper understanding. And he says there's unity. There's belief, Advaita. There's one. I and the Father are one. And then you identify with isness, not with a relative, transitory, illusory consciousness that you experience. You can even have hissy fit, shit fit. You get angry about something. You realize it's just the patternings of your mind that get angry. Did you know some people absolutely hate Trump? They just go crazy about Trump. Then other people absolutely adore Trump. What's the difference? Well, Trump is, but you see, other people like Trump for exactly those reasons. He does it. What's the difference? The patternings in people's minds. That's all. It's all God. So all anxiety and happiness that exist within yourself are just caused by this sense of separation. And separation causes all of these conflicts. When your realization dawns that you're not separate from anything else in the relative sphere of life, you'll have no friction. The lover will not find himself separated from his beloved. He'll find himself to be one with his beloved. So how can there be any friction? When you understand that everything arises from just experience, what's there to be annoyed with? It's your experience, it's your life. Why are you annoyed with it? So where does one do with all these conflicts? Well, you reach the center. You are on the seesaw going up and down all the time. Pleasure today, pain tomorrow, pleasure the next day, pain the following day. You are in this fluctuation because you're fluctuating at either end. But when you realize that both ends are ends of the same stick, you can stand in the center, and then you reach the center of yourself. Sometimes you're mad at Trump. Sometimes you really you don't even think about Trump at all. You're not upset. Sometimes you see a beautiful birds, you're happy. Then you think about Donald Trump and you're unhappy. Then you look at the birds and you're happy again. Look at the center and say, these are just passing reactions and machinations of the mind. I don't need to let them wreck my life. Realize that both ends are the same stick. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven that's within. That is the center. And then from the center, your entire universe can radiate. You're living in a form of illusion. We find the separation through attachment. I like the pretty birds. I don't like Trump. That's attachment. We are also too attached to things. This is my city. This is my house. This is my video. This is my this, that, and the other. Always forgetting that all of this is thee and thine. It all is consciousness. It's all the divine, including me. I'm just a fragment of consciousness. This is the way in which one can alleviate all of the troubles of life. People are always seeking happiness, but that's the wrong thing to seek for, because happiness is just a form of pleasure. And that's the other side of pain. Pain and pleasure go together. You understand why it's relative life. If you feel really happy about one thing, when that thing goes away, you're not happy anymore, right? When you get what you want, you're happy. When you get what you don't want, you're unhappy, right? That's attachment. When you rise beyond that, you land up in the field of joy, where there's neither pleasure nor pain, but only beautiful, joyous equilibrium. When you reach the equilibrium, then all separation ceases. But we only use the ends of the stick. The schoolmaster whacks the child, never with the center of the stick, but always with the end of the stick. I like that. If you are really attached to your notions of pleasure and pain, things that you like and dislike, things that you gain and you lose, if you're really attached to all of that stuff, you're getting whacked by the stick because you are attached to the ends of the stick. You're not in the center of the stick. You're not the creator of the stick. The schoolmaster holds one end and spanks the child with the other end. And that's what's happening to us. We're being spanked by the stick of our own little minds because we lack awareness. As we go deeper into spiritual practices, you'll find your awareness expanding and expanding until you embrace the entire universe in your arms. The expansion of awareness is the rediscovery of pure consciousness that is there within you all the time, but veiled it. We can use the analogy of a light bulb. You wrap pieces of cloth around the bulb and you don't even see the light. But when you slowly remove the coverings one by one, you come to that naked bulb with all of its light, all of its full glory. And you are glorious. If you believe divinity to be glorious and omnipresent, then how can you say that you aren't glorious? How can you not say, well, I too am divine, for everything and everyone is divine? But you fail to see that because of separation, and that oneness, that consciousness, that pure consciousness or unity consciousness can only come about if you first recognize that divinity within yourself. It's like the familiar saying about love. If you can't love yourself, you cannot love others. It's the same principle. Big question for all of us. It's like, okay. How do I recognize this divinity within myself? How do I reach that center? How do I reach that level of awareness? Well, that's what we do in meditation, my friends. When we're not experienced or don't devote our times to meditation, we are continually distracted by the illusion of this constant parade of sense impressions outside of ourselves and these constant thoughts, ruminations, and memories within ourselves. When you meditate, you're constantly stepping back, dropping it. The thoughts come and go, the feelings come and go, the sensations come and go, the perceptions come and go, and yet you are always present. Sometimes you drift off and go to sleep, fall asleep, or you get run off and chase a daydream. Then you say, oh, I'm daydreaming. What is it that recognizes the, oh, I am daydreaming? Awareness, divinity. Pull back, pull back, pull back from that stuff. It's just emanations. It's like watching a TV show that completely has got you completely freaked out. Pull your attention away and look around the room. Oh, it's just a TV program. Trump is just a TV program. I'm just being plugged in by stuff. Through spiritual practices, we discover that inner force. We reach that reservoir of energy, for divinity is energy. You can put any label on it that you like. It still remains just energy. You can't lift your hand without energy. Another word for energy is the activity of isness. All of this is just happening. By the way, you aren't making this happen. This just is happening. You guys get that? Sit down and just grok it. It's all just happening by itself. God does it. Something making you breathe, your blood moves. The sun comes up. It just happens. It remains an energy. You can't lift your hand without the energy. You can't walk 2 steps without this energy. The energy is functioning to make you walk. And yet you have the thought that you are walking. Well, who are you to be able to walk? That energy is moving you. You're not walking. I am not talking. It's the inner energy that is flowing out to you. Because it strikes a chord. It flows through your mind to the heart. That's this oneness. People can call it monism. The Sanskritists call it adait or oneness. The energy within you. You'll just bubble over. You'll become dynamic. You become vital, and it emanates from you, and it captures the hearts and souls of others that are around you. And when you see that divinity within you, you'll automatically and spontaneously and effortlessly see that divinity in others. Everybody is just emanating this divine. You know, there are a lot of us, me too, get into goody-goody moods. Everybody, oh, I love everybody. Everybody's God. Well, find something you really hate. Well, if you hate Trump, for example, or you hate, I was upset by these guys in prison, and see that this too, this too, this too, this too, this is the voice of the divine. This too. Non-separate from it, from isness. That's what meant in the Bible, to love thy neighbor as thyself. Because your neighbor is not separate from yourself. So in this relative world, even if your neighbor is not separate from yourself, well then how could God be separate from yourself? This is so good. The separation of man and God is a misconception that has come about since childhood, from the parents and schools and all your teachers. It served a purpose. It makes you respectful and worshipful. It develops faith in you. It also keeps people in line. You know, so people don't get angry and go out and shoot people or rob things, you know, because people are afraid that I'll have to go to jail if that happens. People they have poor control of themselves. So all this socialization, all these do's and don'ts, a very good purpose. You know, I'm actually in favor of it. People like have to, well, I better not go and hit that person. Of course you shouldn't hit that person. But if you need, you know, you need teaching to make you do that. But that's still relative patterning. Still just relative patterning. It's a higher form of patterning. It served a purpose, but that's not where it ends. Self-realization begins where religions end. Oh God, remember that. I'm off Buddhism now, finally, because I finally realized it's just another damn box. It's just another stupid box. Coordinating the Gita is just another fucking box. Krishna is a box. It's just a thing. He's just like another TV program. Fucking. The hell with it. It's just beliefs. It's just stuff we tell, fairy tales we tell ourselves. Krishna. You know, it's a better sort of patterning than watching the horror, which is the nightly news, which is nothing but a horror show of negative thinking, as Gururaj says. 99% of people focus entirely on the negative. So it's a higher patterning. It's good to, you know, I like Krishna just fine, but it's just another fairy tale. It's like Santa Claus. Self-realization begins where these religions end. Religions just put you in a groove of thought, and then you abide in that. But when you go beyond the groove and you see how vast you really are, and you see how vast divinity is, it's just like being a little frog in a well who thought that that was the whole world, until another frog comes along and takes him to the ocean, said, look, friend, you thought that little well that you were in was everything. Look. And you go, oh, shit, the ocean is gigantic. Oh, my God. How could I have just thought that? That's Krishna. Courtney, you know the thing when Krishna, the Virat form, remember Arjuna sees Krishna and Krishna says, hey, friend, check it out. And he went, whoa, my God. So that Krishna was everything. He was devouring. Everybody was dying in Krishna as well as being born. It's just like, it blew poor Arjuna's mind. Arjuna basically said, oh God, Lord, I can't believe, how could I be making friends with you? I had no idea. I said, just forget it, don't worry about it. Look at the vastness of the ocean, says the frog. So we're just like these little frogs in a well. And by being in that little well, we are unwell. That's where all the trouble lies. No person need to feel any tension whatsoever. No person needs to go through all these stresses and strains of life. They're just mentally created. Once you're established in meditation, mountains can crash down and you won't even bat an eyelid. And what I can do, you can do as well. It just depends on how near you are to this purity of consciousness. As you proceed, you'll gradually find the entire patterns of your thoughts are changing by themselves, because the uncovering of consciousness and the development of greater awareness. You are aware because your eyes might be pointed at this camera standing over here, for example, and yet I'm aware of the entire surroundings around that camera. That's called awareness. Having awareness, you can concentrate on a particular object while at the same time cognizing and recognizing all that is within you. Then there's no separation at all. I think about, you know, you take a little kid or you take your child to the movies, you know, like Charlotte and I, you go to like a Walt Disney film and the child's completely caught up, you know, they really, oh my God, what's happening, you know? Poor Aladdin, and you know, is this coming home, you know, mama, or we're caught up in the movie, oh my God, really? And it's like, if we're aware, we simply say, just a movie, you know, and we'll just follow up, oh, what's going to happen? It was it's okay, you know, it's just a movie, but the child doesn't know that. We know it because we have greater awareness. That's the kind of thing Gururaj is talking about, greater awareness. You're all upset about Trump. Listen, 6 months, this will all be gone. It's all history. Something else that will we all be upset about something else. Trust me. I'm in my late 60s. First there's Nixon, then there's Reagan, then there's the Bush, then there's Bush 2, then there's Clinton. It's just another one shows up. Fuck it. You know, who cares? Just they come and go. So what? Really, ultimately, so. And the second part of your question was, who are we? Where did we come from and why are we here? Well, you might rather say, well, who am I? And where did I come from? And why am I here? Well, you come from nowhere. And you're going nowhere. We don't truly exist. God exists. But what we think we are is the movie. It's our fantasy. We made it up. God made it up. We didn't make it up. You are the universe itself. And where can this vast universe even go to? You're like a bubble in a pond. And the bubble can burst, but you're still in the pond. You see your isness. When you die, you're still isness. And another being appears. In fact, you're dying from second to second. With each thought that arises, persists, and dissipates, another self arises, persists, and dissipates. It's an illusion that you think you live from moment to moment and then you die. That's an illusion. It's like the flickering on a movie. You see the cells going by, the movie partitions, what do they call it in the film strip? It looks like a continuous stream. It's not. The computer screen are just the electrons refreshing themselves from moment to moment to moment. They're just patterns of electrical energy. We think we're looking at people and situations. We're not. We're just looking at patterns of electrical energy. That's all it is. That's isness. Not a single ounce of energy can be distracted from this universe, and not a single ounce of energy can be added on. It's completely whole. And therefore, in order to live holistically, there can't be any separation. You're here in this life for one purpose only. You've come with a burden. That's why the scriptures say that you've been born in sin. You've come with a burden of all of your past impressions and your past karmas. And you've come here to lessen the burden. You have come here like you've come to a school to learn and to lessen the burden. And every experience gained has a particular value. Whether that experience is good or bad, it still teaches you something. And that's how your karma, these impressions, the samskaras, are gradually wiped away. Some of us can do it in one lifetime. But a lot of us have to require hundreds of lifetimes. But each lifetime will reduce that burden and wipe away those samskaras until you have pure consciousness and unity consciousness and oneness with divinity. Then you can say, I and my Father are one. This is something, by the way, I don't completely understand, Gururaj, here. As I understand it, this dream goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Until you start doing spiritual practices and recognize, oh, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming, I'm dreaming. Oh, it's a dream. It is eternal and actually is never changing. Everything that changes is the dream. Then, as I understand it, you slowly, you wake up. Gururaj, I don't know if it's an automatic process, but maybe it is. Who knows? I don't know. Many times might require hundreds of lifetimes. In each lifetime, reduce the burden and wipe away the samskaras until you're pure consciousness, unity consciousness, and oneness with divinity. Then you can say, I and my Father are one. You've come from nowhere and you're going nowhere. Nowhere? Now here. Just by shifting that letter a little bit, that W, and you are now here. That's all that matters. If you can really live just one moment of your life to its fullest value, you have conquered the entire universe. But people don't do that. You know that. In the state of unity consciousness, isness consciousness, there's no past, there's no future, there's no separation from you, there's no universe. You are it. There's no like, oh, I'm experiencing God. No, God simply says, oh, right. You don't join something, you already are. You just suddenly, oh. People don't do that. People live in the past by them mulling over something that's happened to them in the past, although it is past. And when you project the experience of that past into the future, and then you worry about the future. You're going to a party next week, so you worry already about what you're going to wear. But the party is next week. But you're already worrying about what you're going to put on. Then you try to find something that you think is going to be unusual. But don't be surprised if everybody else shows up wearing the same thing. That just happens. Life had lived in expectation of something better to happen. Whoa, listen to that. By the way, it's a lot of false teaching we give young people, I understand. You can be anything you want. Why don't you just be yourself completely in this moment, in this second? Realize what you are, not you can be anything you want. That's a lie, by the way. You can't be anything you want. I want a jet airplane. I want to be rich. I want to publish this book. I want to be successful. I want that boyfriend or that girlfriend. Sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. Right? Doesn't help people. Just gets them lost in illusions. This affirmation business. It just gives them more bullshit to process. Life is lived in expectation of something better is going to happen. And yet it's a well-known fact that expectation is just the mother of disappointment. That prefix dis in disappointment, it nullifies the appointment. Your appointment is here and now, and you're appointed to be nowhere else. You can't move out of the universe. You are still in the universe. And the vastness of awareness that you have will make you realize that you are the universe. You are the everything. That's the purpose of life. That's why you're here, to learn more and more lessons. Now, some of these lessons are difficult. When your children bring homework home from school, they may find the arithmetic or the math or science is difficult. And then they'll ask you to help them out a little bit. But they find it difficult, but they're learning. So many things we find are difficult, even as grown-up beings or thinking beings. And most of us aren't even human beings. We're more like human beings, B-E-A-N-S, meaning we're unthinking. We're beings that think we have the ability to think in a proper way. But as it is, you expend more energy thinking negative thoughts or hateful thoughts than thinking uplifting thoughts and thoughts of love. The purpose of life is to unpattern the patternings that we have created, and thus you lessen the burden that you have come with. The burden that you have come with are the patternings and nothing else. You're running in grooves all the time, and you have to change. You have to change, and that changing is called growth. You grow, and growth necessarily brings about more changes within you, and that's for the better. Now, quickly, because I want to finish up here. I got 1.5 more pages. I've got a good friend, and she's a therapist, so we chat about it. She wanted to find out about Buddhism, so I talked about Buddhism until I realized she didn't want to know about Buddhism. She just wants to know about good tips she can use in therapy. And what is therapy? It's about making people feel better about themselves. What is making people feel better about themselves? Reconditioning the patternings and the grooves of the mind. So instead of going around saying, oh God, every time I try to drive to work, I get frightened. I think that somebody's going to crash into me. Or, oh my God, and this is very serious stuff. I'm not making fun of it. You know, some veteran guy, some horrible thing has happened to them. They were on a tour of Afghanistan or some godforsaken hellhole that they sent these poor young men to torture them. So he comes back and they're the spooked. And they're keeping it carefully under control. And then something triggers them, and then they go nuts. They get terrified, or they hit their wives, or something. You know, they're suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. You know, they've been horribly mangled in their grooving, their patterning. So you give them ways to improve the patterning. You teach them how to manage their stress. How to, oh yeah, I'm going through a stress reaction. You teach them. We know about this in meditation. How do we re-pattern consciousness? So I would add to this as the old adage from somewhere from Buddhism is to remove a thorn that's gotten caught in your foot. You use another pointed object, another thorn to scrape it out, or we'd use a needle. Sometimes you have to substitute for horrible patternings, but positive patternings. And we keep doing that as our awareness expands. Eventually, obviously, we stop identifying with patternings altogether. We stop identifying with patternings altogether. You might find these things hard, but it's like when you try and clean an oily pot in which you've cooked some fatty foods. You've got to use steel wool or something abrasive to scrub it clean. Now, how does the pot feel with that steel wool scraping against it? Not very good, but it makes the pot clean, that's for sure. So if you develop an attitude that you need to do this scrubbing to make yourself clean, then you're not going to find that scrubbing to be too arduous. And if you're worried that you have a lot of pots to wash, you might end up washing these pots 10 times in your mind, and then finally have to get around to doing it for real the 11th time. That's all of us who go through procrastination, like, oh God, I'm worried, anxiety. Just face it. Deal with it. Deal with the patterning instead of suffering from it. So by the way, all these people are going to therapists. Hats off to them. You're trying to have someone assist you to become conscious of all of your negative patternings. Fine. As long as you've got a therapist who's wise enough to make you realize these are unreal. They are patternings. You know, you got to deal with it. So you're expending 11 times the energy by just thinking and worrying about it 10 times. So just get with it and get it done. Then you can sit down with a free mind and meditate if you have nothing else to do. So you've come from nowhere and you go nowhere. You are here. And when this body is dropped, your soul, your subtle body, it goes to another plane of existence for evaluation. But it's still here. It's nowhere else because that plane of existence, there is no time and space. That plane is here. This is really hard to get. The afterlife, the soul, God is not up in heaven. It's isness. And there's no other place for isness to be. It's like he said, the universe, you can't get out of the universe because the universe is you. That plane is here. And there might be millions of soul bodies floating around here. And they also like to listen to Gururaj speak. So who am I? That's the greatest question in the world. And no philosopher of metaphysics has ever been able to answer it for you. That answer can only come from within yourself. And when you reach that integrated state of mind, body, and spirit, the answer to who you are, it dawns automatically. There'll be only one answer. You'll just say, oh, I'm divine. That's who I am. Very mysterious. He once said, realization comes in the spark of a moment, flash of a moment, like a match. The effort goes in the preparation, the cleansing. Realization dawns completely automatically. You don't have to say, oh, well, okay, what is isness? I'm going to get isness. You can't get isness because you are already isness. Our lives are lived in a very fragmented way, and this causes greater and greater anxiety and problems. Just keep on asking that question to yourself when you have nothing else to think about, because on the surface level of the conscious mind, it doesn't really think. It only thinks that it thinks. It doesn't think. It's just old thoughts that are churning and churning around all the time. And because of that churning, you don't allow the conscious mind to sink lower to a more refined level. When the conscious mind, through your practices, reaches a refined level, then you'll start answering that question, who am I? The total answer will come with the total integration of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. Then you'll not only be totally integrated within yourself, but also with everything outside of yourself. There's a phrase, I think it's vichara, which means self-inquiry. And fans of Ramana Maharshi, listen to him, the famous aphorism where he said, just, whenever you read dialogues with Ramana Maharshi, basically he said, oh, Bhagwan, How can I achieve self-realization? Please tell me, Bhagwan. Oh, Bhagwan, tell me, how do I achieve self-realization? And he says, who's asking the question? Oh, Bhagwan, I ask this question myself. I do not know, but I want to know, how do I achieve? How do I find that out, Bhagwan? I do not know what I am. Who's asking the question, who am I? Bhagwan, Brahma hearts come in. Okay. Oh, Bhagwan, it's the questioning which is stopping the integration. It's the questioning. Gururaj talks about it. At a certain point, the question just ceases because you're there. And you suddenly realize, it's like, oh, I'm divine. Oh my God. Adyashanti said it's a big joke. So when you finally get it, you say, oh my God. Oh, well, that's perfectly obvious. Yeah, you didn't see it, but it was perfectly obvious what it was. Then you'll be not only totally integrated within yourself, but you'll be integrated with everything outside of yourself. This world we live in is a world has only limited value. It's just a relative world because we view this world from the surface level of our minds. Therefore, we see nothing but turmoil. But the turmoil we observe us around us starts with this turmoil within ourselves. As the old saying goes, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. So if the beholder is beautiful, then everything around you is also beautiful. If there are conflicts in the world, you just rise above them. You can't do anything about these conflicts. Great reformers have come and gone, Krishna and Buddha and Christ, but the world's still the same as it was 2,000 or 5,000 years ago. Nothing has changed. There's still just much lust, just as much greed, and all those warring factions with their hot wars and cold wars and all kinds of wars. This is because of one reason. People are warring within themselves with all of these conflicts they're undergoing. There is this higher force that's trying to express itself all the time, but you're blocking it by your ego self that's cluttered in with all these patternings, all this dirt, so that the light doesn't shine through. We unpattern these patternings. We clean the dirty glass of the windows so the light shines through. The light shines through our minds, lightening it up, and through our bodies, lightening our bodies up. You develop that beautiful glow, and the mind becomes kind and compassionate. It assumes qualities of your higher self, and the higher self is nothing but love. You allow that infinite love to filter through your minds and bodies. People come to me with all kinds of problems and say, I'm not loved. No one loves me. That's not true. Become lovable, and then you're going to see that people will love you. That's the secret. If somebody says to me that they are an emotional, mental, and spiritual cripple, I tell them, that's nonsense. You aren't. You may think you are. So why think in that way? You're a gift unto yourself, a gift which you have been presented as a life force, and it can never be crippled. How could God be crippled? I have the, sorry, the image. If you're a pencil geek, I'm sorry, I apologize to you. Like these people walking around, like in high school, the geek, with the pencils in their shirt, and they're the geek, like, how on earth did they figure that out? How do they know how to be a perfect geek? How do people know how to be themselves? I'm such a fucking neurotic wreck. How do you know how to be such a perfect neurotic fucking wreck? How do you know that? How do you know how to screw up your life so thoroughly? Because I agree, yes, you screwed up your life. Boy, you did a beautiful job. Where did you get the energy, the insight, the knowledge, the wisdom? Where did these patternings come from? Gururaj is just pointing out, you don't have to live out these patternings. You can change them. You are a gift to yourself. It can't be crippled. It flows on and on and on all the time. It can't be lost. Isness can never be lost. With thoughts like that, we wallow in self-pity and feelings of guilt and anxieties, and they aren't necessary. When somebody feels that he's going to lose his job, he builds up a lot of anxiety within himself. He creates a negative aura around him, and it's going to make him lose that job. It's what you emanate. It's your actions, your emanation that brings about corresponding reactions. These reactions are made by your own actions. If your heart is filled with love, love is returned to you tenfold. And that's an indisputable law. Think about that guy I told you about in prison. Also think about that guy that was murdered by the state, that 40-year-old. He's going to have another life. And my God, he had, to me, a very successful life. If he could go with compassion, wisdom, and collectedness and get injected and have those hell beings kill him, and he went peacefully, he's spiritually, he's fine. He'll be back. If you give one, you'll receive 10 back in return, always. So the question of who am I will be realized when the mind is filled with good thoughts. I could go on and on about that, but it's true. Good patternings, good thoughts. These come from the subtler levels of the mind, the superconscious level, which is now infiltrating the conscious level of the mind so that your mind is filled with positive thoughts. Very interesting. He's saying when you develop greater awareness, spiritual awareness, you automatically have positive thoughts, positive thinking. And all you meditators, if you don't know this by now, frankly, why are you still meditating? I mean, if you've been meditating for a year and you haven't figured that out, it should be abundantly clear to you. Goodness leads to goodness. Negative thinking leads to more negative thinking. It's perfectly obvious. Everybody has negative thinking because they have negative patternings, negative samskaras. But that doesn't mean you can't recondition the mind. Otherwise, it's hopeless. And it isn't hopeless. We can recondition the mind. Because of this heightened awareness, your heart opens and unfolds with love so that you can have good thoughts and positive thoughts. And these are welling up with love. Your cup runneth over. That's the secret of life. That's why you're here. And that's why you really are. It just requires self-discovery. It's not an uncharted sea. You don't need a compass to find yourself. What you just need to do is to dive deeper and deeper within yourself. Then you see this great beauty of everything, and that this world is so, so beautiful. There's nothing ugly. I can only see ugliness if I feel that I am ugly. And I can only see beautiful if I know that I am beautiful. That's the attitude. And then you know why I am here. Then you know who I am. And then you know that I've come from nowhere and I'm going nowhere. Shedding this body does not mean you're going anywhere, because the most important aspect of yourself is this all-pervading spirit. And that spirit can go nowhere because it's already all-pervading. Wow. What an amazing freaking satsang. By the way, this is my own slight editing of it. Vidya has edited a version of it, and AMS has published this as a booklet. I don't know how you can get a hold of that booklet, but you can find it. And I'm going to give you the number of it. It's US 84036, the relationship between God and man. And I sent it out as a PDF to everyone. This is well worth a lot of looking, contemplating, and being aware of. It's a very profound spiritual text. So I'm going to, because I'm going to publish this on YouTube, I'm going to end the recording part of the session, then open it up for everybody to say whatever they want to say. So let me see.